Hey guys, thanks for watching. Is ERP, exposure response prevention, effective for OCD? I've got some thoughts on this. It's based on my own experience and also some research and other people I've learned from. I'm going to share about now. And exposure response prevention, is essentially working with the way our brains work because our brains work on this stimulus and adaptation, right? On a physical sense, if you add stress to a muscle, it adapts to get stronger or bigger or both, right? Our aerobic system, you stress it aerobically through cardiovascular exercise, you're going to get a more robust aerobic system. This is all controlled by the brain. Our brains do this also emotionally, mentally, through these conditioned patterns. So if we have this belief that snakes are bad for me. Or snakes are scary. Spiders are scary. Flying on planes, public speaking. Right? We have these phobias. We call them culture socially call them phobias, but these can be like OCD fears, right? Where it takes up a lot of our brain, and we do behaviors to avoid or to deal with this anxiety. Well, ERP, the exposure, right, is adding a stimulus that brings up the anxiety, right? If it's touching the spider or imaginarily scripting or whatever about touching a spider, you gradually go into it, right? So you habituate to it and the anxiety reduces. So the goal there is to reduce the anxiety, right? And we're going to come back to this about how this relates to pure O. Um, Goal is to reduce the anxiety. So a lot of the research, you look at this for OCD, it's like, man, it's very effective. It's the most effective treatment we have for OCD, right? However, exposure response prevention is not super effective for all of OCD. And it wasn't for me. Now, a lot of my videos are about Puro, right? 'Cause that's sort of what I'm coming from. The intrusive, irrational thoughts, you all know that come with Puro. It's not the hand washing so much. It's not even though I had some of these too. It's not the contamination um, or checking types, right? It's more the obsessional thoughts and patterns that go up here. It just lives up here. People don't always see what you're living with, what's going on. Now, I think ERP on those phobias of like flying and spiders and fears, they work pretty well. They work pretty well in reducing that. And apparently, even the research shows it works pretty well with OCD that's related to contamination, cleanliness, and checking, like we mentioned. I would still say there's a lot that builds up and develops to make that, and I'd be interested in long term efficacy of ERP only for that. But does ERP really work well for Puro? Here's my take. So going off my own experience, um, and also people I've learned from, a guy named John Glanville, I've mentioned a lot his work. We've come to know that people with Puro, like myself, they tend to have more of a nomadic personality. So nomadic is part of the three personality types you've probably heard me talk about in other videos: warrior, settler, nomad, okay? We're a bit more nomad, meaning we're a little more energetic, a little more charismatic. We like to be the center of attention, at least parts of us does. We're a bit more ADHD sometimes, or full-blown ADHD. Mentally sharp and creative. We need more stimulation in life, or it's easy to get bored. But the key here is this part of you is suppressed because of fears that we have. Now, what's interesting is you may not recognize this part of yourself, meaning you may not be because it's suppressed. It may not, you might be like, that's not me, or maybe you might be like, it sounds like me a little bit, but I don't really live that way. So it's suppressed. So what I did, if I go back in my childhood, who was I in childhood? Well, I was all of that. I was all of that between like early on till, man, maybe like 10, 11, 12, before my consciousness or my conscious thought patterns of like how I started to think of myself started forming, and I started to revert to this conditioning pattern that took me into uh, basically repressing and shunting that sort of nature inside of me, and became someone who I wasn't. And I would say this is the pathology that leads to anxiety. And that's when anxiety started creeping in, and then into OCD. Um, you express this more as a child. So one way to look at this is to look at how you're thinking. It's often we are thinking one way, but we're correcting for it by thinking and behaving a different way. And this is the pathology. So an example here is just, and part of you wants to put yourself out there and showcase yourself in some way. But you tell yourself to be humble, or that it's too prideful or some bullshit, right? Or someone does something to you that makes you furious inside. Now, and if you're really in a deep spot like me, you don't even feel the fury because you've pushed it down so much. This could be the result for you as well. You may feel fury inside, but you tell yourself that they didn't mean it, or don't be angry, or some other bullshit. Or you keep doing something for someone that you inwardly resent, but you tell yourself to not be unkind or some bullshit. You see, it's the mental dialogue that often goes unnoticed. And this is what is suppressing these natural urges and desires. Like I said, I was so unaware of this for so long that I didn't recognize this. But this is the beauty of what I'm sharing with you, because once you develop this awareness, you start looking. You have this the observer part of your mind that is able to now become aware of this going on. And until you get that, nothing's going to move. Nothing's going to change. So people with Puro, we've done this since childhood, and it has ramped up the anxiety to the next level. Okay, so this energy gets pushed down, but then it comes back up to bite us through our obsessive thoughts. I've talked a lot about this in other videos. Now, what's interesting here is that since we've already gotten so used to habitually mentally correcting ourselves, like I just mentioned, it starts to become automatic, and we're not thinking about it so much. It's happening. We continue to try that with Puro. So once the anxiety manifests to Puro, we continue to use our thoughts to try to push it away, right? To manipulate it, control it. And this is why anything can turn into a compulsion. And often therapists get this wrong with people because they'll try CBT and all these other thinking-based approaches, and what do? We just use it to manipulate the thoughts, right? This creative energy and brain of ours just use it to push away. It's not getting to actually the problem here, the issue. Um, so, oftentimes in this sort of recovery method, the focus becomes, how can I get rid of these thoughts? Okay, like the OCD phobia thing with ERP done on like a fear. How can I get rid of this fear of flying on an airplane, or a fear of this phobia of spiders? Okay, it's lasered in on that. Okay, I don't think that's a good method for someone with Puro. Well, it didn't work for me in my experience. So hey, you can tell me different your experience, but I don't think the treatment should be about that, because in my opinion, it's not. It was never about these thoughts, these obsessions, these fears. This is why traditional ERP for Puro doesn't work well, and the studies support this. The studies, I'm going to link a research article that was in one of the journals for psychiatric something, um, that talks about the just how well it doesn't work for all of OCD. It doesn't work for people with more pure obsessions in this certain this nature that I'm talking about with Pure O. So, um, my opinion, recovery should not be about getting rid of the OCD thoughts, but about getting into your life by taking action again on what you want and learning new ways to handle the anxiety that will come up when you do it. And this is ERP. This is the exposure you want to bring into your life. It's ERP on your life. Okay, so then the Puro obsessions are going to naturally come up to challenge you, to challenge that action you're taking, right? Because it's trying to keep you from that. And then you work on what presents in your mind. Okay, so instead of like, I never did ERP on the obsessions law. I tried, but it never worked. So I, moved on. But never did it on ERP on the OCD Puro obsessions as an end result, right? So, hey, my thing is start to challenge yourself by tapping into what you want in your life and let it come up. It's gonna come up. So when it comes up, then you learn these new ways of processing and handling the anxiety, the fears, right, the sensations without mentally trying to adjust it. That's the skill. But this is where we learn how to process anxiety in a different way. It's where how we learn to access our anger. I've talked about this in other videos, and gain more emotional bandwidth for our experiences. How to become more aware of the stories we are telling ourselves that are repressing our wants and desires. Just mentioned this earlier with examples. I personally had so many fearful beliefs about myself that was just choking out my intuition and connection to myself. And this is the beauty. This is one thing you're going to gain as you become aware of all this and let go of the judgment you have toward yourself. Because, man, if you're in this state and you get what I'm talking about, you've got so many judgments about yourself that limit yourself. And it's just based on the way we were conditioned to believe about the world, about ourselves. We can become aware, we can recreate that. And our physiology is going to reflect that in a new way. And you're going to love the way it reflects it. So that's my thoughts on ERP for Puro. Okay? Do ERP on your life. It works very well, but it puts the focus, the goal of your recovery on your life and what you want to do. Our subconscious, our brains, they're goal-seeking machines. So if your goal is to focus on getting rid of something, which is going to focus on that thing, it's going to keep getting more and more of the obsessions. If you focus on living your life, then let the shit come up and process that. Your mind is going to start moving you towards getting into your life, and you're going to have more life. You're going to have more life and not more fear. To me, it's all about that end goal. What are you moving towards? Yeah, I just found that ERP tends to not work well if done solely for the purpose of correcting thoughts. My experience. I'm curious to hear yours though. What's your take on this? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you to Marina, I think that's your name, for proposing this question about my thoughts on ERP. I love when you guys ask questions. That was my first one actually, but ask more. I'll do more videos on this as it helps me orient myself to what I want to talk about as well. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.